Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, the Witkoff Group, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns, Jean Tomasi and Webster, Greenberg Traurig, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Hap Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
It's called wine. It's the food of the gods. It's a business, and it's really becoming a major business on the North Fork of Long Island. It's probably celebrating its 39th year this year since the first vintage. And so, you know, some number of the people who have been involved with the North Fork wine business are getting older, and they're changing. They're seasoning, like my friend Mr. Massoud, okay? And there are younger people joining. So today I've brought together a group of individuals to provide their insight on who's the next generation in the wine business on the North Fork. My guests, they include Jonathan Lynn from Bedell, Trent Peltzer, who is with also Bedell, the CEO of Bedell, Kareem Massoud, who is with Pominock, and of course, my executive producer for all my wine shows, Charles Massoud of Pominock. So you got involved with wine in about 1983?
Correct.
And you had this 10-year-old son over there, and you were living in Connecticut, and somebody said, a potato farm, we've done the story, and your first vintage was when?
The first commercial vintage was 1989. We had it made actually by Rich, who is the current winemaker when he was at Bridgehampton Winery.
So this is 1989. Bedell and Corey Creek, which is now really called Bedell, was really founded by Kip.
Kip Bedell founded the winery, and I think his first plantings were 77, 78. His first releases were 80, 81.
Yeah, well, it's sort of debatable, but I think he planted his first vine somewhere between 79 and 80, and then his first wines were in 1984. We have photos of the moment that he put the first vine in the ground.
So here's the question. We're not asking your age, Mr. Massoud, okay?
It's no secret.
Okay, we have Mr. Lynn, whose family has been involved with Bedell since 1999. Yep. Okay, we have Trent, who's been involved with the wine business for the past 12, 13 years?
Thereabouts, yeah.
13 years, but he's only 34.
I'm 37.
Oh, you're 37. Okay, what happens is those bios don't tell. Kareem, how old are you now?
41.
You're 41. So in essence, you've been involved with the business your entire life.
Yeah, I have.
So as I said on my previous show a couple weeks ago, the North Fork wine business has come of age. It's quality, it's great wine. there's great facilities over there. There are fine tasting rooms, and people want the North Fork wine. In essence, we can't even meet the demand based on the volume. So how do we get people like the kid from South Dakota to, did you know what Long Island was?
I didn't, to be honest. I grew up in South Dakota, went to college in Iowa. I came to New York to go to grad school at Cornell, and somehow I connected with Michael Lynn.
Yeah, but that was Ithaca. Cornell
that was Ithaca, right. And that the first time I ever came to Long Island in my life was when I was interviewing for this job at Bedell. And at the time, you know, being from the Midwest, I guess that was 15 years ago, I was even confused. I thought I got the Hamptons mixed up with the Berkshires. I had to actually look at a map. But
well, you think you were going to get a job at the Finger Lake Vineyards? Okay.
No, I was living in the Finger Lakes for graduate school, so I was more familiar with that industry. But you know, certainly there's commonalities between a lot of regional wine regions.
You were the youngest CEO ever in the wine business when you were named CEO of Bedell a couple of years ago. How do we today, you know, you've been involved with, I mean, the family bought the business in 1999. You joined the business in like 2000
I joined full-time for the first time in the early 2000s, and then came back for this more formal stint where I'm running sales and marketing about 4 years ago. Yeah.
And you came back into the business when?
1998. It's been 16 years that I'm there full-time at Pominock.
And how do you like the fact that your son is full-time in the business, and it's not your only son, it's all your sons in the business?
You know, at the beginning...
For a former IBMer, I mean, you were not in the wine business.
At the beginning, I didn't want them to work for us because, you know, it wasn't really a business. It was more a hobby, and I didn't want to shortchange them. But against my better judgment, they all wanted to come and work with us. So at the beginning, I was in denial. Like, these guys don't know what they're doing. They only have two left hands. And in fact, because they were passionate about what we do, they kind of imposed themselves on us, and I had to correct myself, you know. One night I wasn't sleeping well, and I said to myself, how come, you know, my son isn't as good as I am, you know? And then I said, how was I doing when I was his age? And that's when, as they say, the light went on, that they were not the problem, I was being the problem, because I wasn't giving them a chance to perform. And when I finally corrected for that, it turns out that they are today really the biggest asset of our operation.
Now, you're the winemaker, and your brothers?
My one brother, Nabil, is the vineyard manager, and my brother, Salim, is administrative and logistical support team.
And your role is sales and
I
marketing?
run our sales and marketing, primarily from here in New York City.
You run the kitchen. You
Right.
run everything.
I'm the CEO, so I have my finger in every single imaginable pot.
And
basically.
which is the most responsible? Which one do you think? Because it's the quality of the wine that really, you know, it's the production, it's the final product.
Right.
That's really important. I mean, it's great to have distribution that has sales, but if we don't have the right product, he can't get the distribution and sales out there.
It all starts with the wine, and certainly the wine all starts in the vineyard. So we focus very intensely on our grape growing practices in the vineyard. We achieved sustainable certification in 2012. And then shepherding that fruit into the winery and making the best wines we can. Every single thing we do on a daily basis starts there.
So who's coming into the business besides the fact that this is a generation over there? I mean, how many vineyards do we have on the North Fork right now?
If you look at vineyards, I mean, the definition has changed over the years. You know, it used to be that to be a winery, you had to have a vineyard, you had to put up a building, get equipment, and all that. Today, you could buy grapes from me, have him make wine for you, and you're a winemaker.
Right, which is what the guy in Red Hook does today. He gets his grapes from the Finger Lakes and the North Fork.
But he has his own operation. He has his own winery. And so if you include all of those that we call wine producers, together with the estate wineries, which is a full-fledged operation, we have perhaps about 55 licenses today. But estate wineries such as Bedell and Pominock, where we own our own vineyards and our own winemaking operations, perhaps 25 of those. Now, what's happening is there's a transition. I think the old guard is moving on. Some of us are dying, some of us are retiring. I want to go play golf. And therefore, the new generation is taking over. Thank God we have a number of operations where there is fresh blood coming in.
So that relates to my question. Who wants to come into the wine business? What is attracting the younger generation, the next generation of wine people? And I'm not talking only the winemaker or the administrative, the CEO of the business, or the salespeople. You know, I recently had a tour of Bedell. I ran into a person. I asked him his background. He ran a restaurant. He was a maitre d'. He wanted, and now he's going for a sommelier. So what type of people are coming into the business who are not family or friends? You know, who, I mean, you came from TV, you came from different business, you went to Wharton, you were in the business world. Who's coming to the business, and why are they coming to the business?
I would say that beyond the winemaking talent specifically, but people that want to get into the business side of it, it's a very broad swath of people. We have some very bright young people, in particular working for me in my area, literally kids that are, and calling them kids is perhaps inappropriate, but you know, 24, 25-year-old.
I know, you're over 40 now.
So I'm allowed to say that. But you know, in particular, several young people from Cornell, and obviously we have a deep Cornell bench already within the Bedell family, but obviously they have a great reputation for hospitality education and even specifically oenology. So there are people that are going to school specifically with an eye towards the food and wine industry in some fashion, and many of them find their way to the North Fork, in particular because so much of a spotlight has hit our region recently.
You know, wine is glamorous. People want to be associated with wine and food. And as Michael said, we get a lot of people, for example, people who come...
Jonathan, you're missing the role.
Jonathan, sorry. So the people who come to work in the tasting room, they come from all sorts of backgrounds. And then from the tasting room, they graduate.
Right, but you know, it's very interesting, and I think Michael, when he was on Jonathan's father a couple of weeks ago, he said, you know, it's not they're in the business of being in the wine business. It's not a vanity business. They want to produce a quality. It's the same reason. You know, you people, I've known some people who knew you from IBM, who worked for you. You were a quality person in IBM, and you wanted to bring the same tradition also of what your family had done in Lebanon going back, of being in the food business. You were in the hospitality business over there. So, you know, that's important. As you see, because you're involved with the, you know, the two of you are out there full time. Do you see at the other vineyards and the estates younger people coming there, and what's their type of background?
Yes, I mean it's very exciting that there's all kinds of young people coming in into our region, North Fork of Long Island and the Hamptons, AVAs, and also up in the rest of New York State in the Finger Lakes. There's all kinds of young people who are coming. Some of them are leaving the city, and some of them have kind of had it for one reason or the other with the city life. But one of the wonderful things about being on the east end of Long Island is that the city is not that far away. And so that has a lot of, I mean, for me that always had appeal. It's not like I was moving to some place like South Dakota, which is very removed from...
That's why he moved from South Dakota.
Right, although there I think are a couple wineries there actually.
I'm joking, but I mean, but the point is, the city life, the culture of New York surrounds us and is so accessible. But you still have the appeal of the country life and the culture, the food and wine culture that we have on the east end of Long Island.
So what's the initial jobs that someone? I mean, you're in the sales and marketing, and the people. And I've looked at your website. You have a bunch of younger people working over there who are all from sales, who are involved with sales and marketing, which is important. What are the other roles that we're seeing? You know, as you said before, your brothers are involved. One is more administration. One's more involved with the tasting room, because the tasting room is a very important thing, because that's the way that many people learn of your wines.
That's the face of the business. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as the region has grown, the businesses have become not only more successful, but able to offer opportunity. So while Cornell has developed its hospitality, viticulture, and enology programs, and more young people are interested in local food and wine, you know, it's not just by magic that they can decide one day that they want to go into the wine business. So a lot of us have been able to provide opportunities for young people, whether it's tasting room, bartenders, sales and marketing support, or even winemaking. And in 2005, we started a Harvest intern program. So every year since then, we've had at least 3 interns who work for us, usually from August through December. And they're very intense positions where they get hands-on experience picking grapes, making wine. And those interns have gone on to do really great things around the world.
One of those interns has become my principal street distribution person for restaurants here in New York City. So,
the thing that I think we get emails every week from people who suddenly have a revelation that
It's
they want to get into
sexy.
wine
You know
business,
what? We were talking before. It's a sexy business. It's something, you know, it's not working, you know, investment banking. It's not taking care of spreadsheets.
You know, Michael, there is the geography also. The East End is essentially the Riviera of New York City. And people love to be out there. And so you combine the geography with the quality image that we're developing on the island and the contact with the restaurant, and all of that scene is glamorous, and people want to be involved in things like that. So it's a draw. It makes it easy for us to recruit because we have more applicants than we can hire, actually.
Is there a set career path? I mean, because you're a business that's evolved. We're not a business that we're 5, 6 years of age, where, you know, somebody had a potato farm and somebody said, I'll grow some grapes and then I'll go into this. We're in a business that's really evolved, the food business, okay? When Jonathan worked for the Food Network, it wasn't a Food Network. Food Network didn't even air in New York City at that time.
there were PBS cooking shows, and what we were philosophically trying to do was create an expansion of that into something more mainstream while maintaining and retaining the informational quality that you want to give.
You know, the change that is happening is that when we all started, it was a family business. It was the husband, the wife, and the children. Today, we're beginning to recruit outsiders to staff positions. They're not necessarily, some of them are in management positions, but we are about to get there ourselves, where we're going to need to start hiring managers from the outside, where we no longer have enough family members to fill those slots. And I think the parallel exists at other wineries, where we see as we grow, we need to beef up the management ranks, and there isn't enough family members left. So it's changing from being a family-driven business to a more of a corporate.
See, I could see, you know, somebody doing a year or 2 years in the wine, in the Norfolk wine, and that experience they can utilize, you know, if they wanted to open up a restaurant, or if they wanted to go into the hotel business.
It's happened
because
in our
because
place.
it is hospitality. You know, it's one of the levels of hospitality.
Right.
You know, when people think hospitality, they once thought that it was just restaurants or hotel. Hospitality is much larger. I'm going to be teaching a course at NYU, and one of the classes is going to be talking about the hospitality industry, which is even talking about Broadway. And the arts, it's all part of hospitality in New York.
Right.
And this comes over there, and you grow. And if somebody can get the opportunity, you know, I mean, you got it at a very young age because you had the experience and quality over there to learn. And if you take your experience and education of what you've done, you've been able to utilize it. And also many of the years, you know, from Wharton and from the business side, you're applying over here. Okay? You know, and I think that's important. But how does somebody today find an opportunity in the North Fork, in the wine business? I mean, as I alluded with a guy who works for you, you know, you could see he's passionate. He's going for his sommelier, which he may utilize, may stay with you, or he may take it somewhere else. But it's going to go to the next level. You know, and when we had McCary, she's going for her sommelier. What does that do? What's the value of that for the business?
I think there's really kind of 2 sides of the business. There's production and there's hospitality. So there is a more traditional career path for people who want to become winemakers in the traditional sense. And many of those people come to us from traditional viticulture and enology scientific training programs, whether that's at Cornell in upstate New York or University of California at Davis. That, I would say, is a little more restrictive in terms of people just deciding they want to get into the wine business. But certainly on the hospitality side of things, whether it's sales, marketing, or even administration, there is a lot of carryover and overlap with the hospitality world in New York City. Hotels, sommeliers, I mean, these people are all kind of speaking the same language. We're all talking to customers every day about wine, helping people learn about wine. And I think the success of not only the North Fork, but also of our businesses to be able to bring in new talent has also in some ways paralleled this rise in the importance of local food and local eating. And I guess you would call it the locavore movement in New York City. And you know, in the 12 years or so that I've been at Bedell, I've seen a dramatic change in New Yorkers' willingness to try and experiment with and enjoy and support local food and wine. And for many years, I think there was a little disconnect between the local agricultural products, carrots, lettuce, everything else, and the local wine.
I did a show a couple weeks ago where I had these restaurant people, and we were talking about Union Square. I mean, before Danny Meyer opened up the Union Square Cafe, you really didn't have food places,
Right.
and the produce market and the farmers market in Union Square.
Right.
But today that food is brought over there, and I think you know, Edible New York, the magazine, has done very well for a variety of things. It's done
Right.
well for the food industry. It's done well. You've been profiled on that because it's bringing this together. An important aspect, I think, of the wine business, besides the production of the wine and the management, is the tasting room, because that's your, you know, for people, that's the market. They're learning.
That's the Broadway stage.
That's the stage, and I think you bring it out correctly. It is the Broadway stage. How do you, and for that Broadway stage, you need certain type of people to work in that stage.
Absolutely.
Right,
Okay.
right.
You know, Broadway, to get on the Great White Way, it takes time. You know, you have to. It's like an apprenticeship. How do you find that quality person to be in the tasting room?
You know, like I said, I mean, we have more applicants than we have positions to fill, and we get to choose. I mean, once you have enough people who come to you looking for a job, you have the ability to, by interviewing them, to select what would fit. And we all, I think, have had good luck in finding very talented people who fit very well in our business. And the hospitality extends. We have wineries today that have bed and breakfast. And that's perhaps the next step.
I think that's a very important thing. You know, when I was at Bedell, I mean, one of your big aspects is renting out the facility for these big events. I mean,
Right.
you're really not into that because you have a different type of layout with
Right.
your facility. But with your tasting room, and you know, that's a big business. You know,
Right. Corporations, they usually like to have an outing where they have a planning session, a business discussion where they need privacy. We haven't opened up yet for those types of activities, but that's coming. And you know, the B&B is coming. And so there are extensions to the hospitality part of our business where, with the backdrop of a winery, you can actually create activities that are very desirable, that draw a clientele that heretofore we haven't had, which is perhaps a more interesting.
No, I think you bring up a very interesting point, especially and this happened in Westchester a number of years ago. They, you know, the Doral people had built the Doral Conference Center, which was a corporate conference center. You have the opportunity, especially because they have been opening up a couple of more hotels in Riverhead, and so in that section of town, that corporations could come and have a meeting over there in a different place. It's a totally unique experience. It's not going to Colorado. It's not taking a trip over there, and it's a very environmental friendly environment to be into.
Exactly.
And that is I think a great opportunity.
And in the next month, I mean, Bedell will be hosting several events for businesses and corporate partners, and in fact, our distributor even will be coming out with their whole group, not to taste our wines or experience Bedell, but rather to have their monthly Friday meeting in a different, more commodious place.
Right.
But we'll also be doing weddings every single Saturday night over the course of that month too.
And to go back to your question about finding people to kind of man the Broadway stage, as Jonathan put it, for us, when we're interviewing people, they're often afraid that they don't know enough about wine. And I always just say, that's fine, we can teach you that. That's really not the important thing. When we're interviewing tasting room workers or bartenders or event staff, we're really just looking for people who are charismatic and who enjoy being around other people and who can carry a conversation and talk to people about wine. Because a lot of the people that come to the wineries on the North Fork they're on vacation or they're just seeking an experience and a good time. And we have to remember that we're not on vacation. And so we have to put our staff in the mindset of helping educate everyone that comes out there and giving them an experience that they can take back with them, whether it's to New York City or around the country.
I think the personality and the charisma is very important, and that's who you're showcasing, and that's how people are coming out there, and the camaraderie and the working environment.
Also, it's our conduit to consumers, right? So we have the ability, and it's wonderful that our tasting room exists, and within 100 miles there's roughly 20 million people, and the best way we can touch consumers and talk to them not only about our wines, but just about the whole North Fork and the development and preservation of this agricultural district is right there in our tasting room. That's how we sign up new wine club members. That's how we book weddings and events for future years. And that's how we establish really lasting long-term relationships. The distribution is also very important. We sell wine to restaurants in New York City. We have about 200 accounts throughout the metro area. But once you sell the wine to a restaurant, then the relationship building is kind of out of your hands for the most part. So it really drills home the importance of the tasting room and the people we have working there, because they're hands-on every day. They're really interacting with the customers.
And then you're having an experience of the wine tours, showing them the facility, taking people around. And people who are going out to the wine country in the North Fork are not going there for 20 minutes anymore. They're spending, it's a full day. It's, maybe some of them go to a number of vineyards, but I'd say maybe it's one or two. They're not running around to be boozed up completely. People are looking for a place. They're trying to find the right place, and I think it's the environment and the personalities of the people that make the business.
They're looking for the setting for their Saturday afternoon. And Bedell represents, that initial handshake for us with the customer, and then our opportunity to embrace them and bring them into a place that fully involves them in Bedell, not just the wine.
So all I can say is that since the North Fork wine country has come of age, it's also coming of age with regard to the next generation of wine leaders in a variety of business. And it's wine leaders, who could be CEOs, winemakers, salespeople, in every aspect of hospitality. And I'd like to thank Jonathan, Trent, Kareem, and Charles, and I'll see you next week.